leaders are created by learning, not being born. If you look into scientific theories, greater man theory, etc., it all says there is no born leader. If you do not look into scientific evidence, you just have another opinion out there, and there's always another opinion on anything. Anyone today has an opinion on anything, and that becomes part of the problem. When you have leadership people out there who say, this magic phrase works every single time, that is where the problem begins.
How would you tackle a German-speaking team, a DACH team?
Well, when you are in Germany, of course, one thing you have to look for is structure. That feedback means rubbish. You missed the point. He will not get back to you. You completely missed the point.
What's your advice to the people who are being promoted out of a team as their new leader? Thank you so much for listening to the first ever English sales podcast for the German-speaking market. Before we continue, I want to make you a promise. I promise that with this show, I will do my utmost best to bring in the guests and share the stories that help you succeed in the DACH market. But I can only do so much. So, if you hit the subscribe button, I can get more guests, bigger stories, and better insights to help you succeed in your sales job. So, with no further ado, sit back, relax, and let the show begin. Niels, why do you do what you do?
Well, I've been on both ends, the giving and the receiving side, but in the beginning of my career, I was on the receiving side of leadership. And as you can probably guess, I had one amazing boss. Fortunately, my first job after uni was an amazing boss. However, I had more than one boss, and let's say there was a bit of potential with others. And I very quickly wondered, why is it that sometimes I like to do annoying work without any problem, and sometimes I don't enjoy the usually and joyful work with the other boss? And then I simply looked into leadership, and I found out that leadership is a crucial part of not only how to attract and how to retain, but also talent, but also how to develop organizations.
I love that. I love how you have that mindset of analysis as well, and just like understand, okay, cool, I like something and then I don't like it anymore. Like, where's that coming from? I love that, and I feel like that's such a crucial part in any career, to have that and like self-analysis of understanding what is good, what isn't. I know one of your slogans is, especially on LinkedIn, is "in business since 1998."
Yeah.
Since then, I assume a lot of things have changed.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Right? Especially towards like workforce and the different generations that are now a part of your team, the different cultures. How, like, what changes have you seen and how have you tackled them?
So there are, of course, numerous changes. We have to cover the intergenerational gap here. And of course, we have to cover different leadership styles, situational approaches. However, one of the most important and most crucial parts is that, and we still see that it has changed over time, but still enough people don't get it. Some people still think they can just let themselves down and offer people work. And they think other people have to prove, why should I hire you? Why should I give you work? When you ask for work, why should I pick you? And wake up call here, that's not how the world works anymore. Usually when people have a degree from a university, they usually have offers on the table even before they finished university, and then they can pick which of the 2, 3, or 4 employers they actually want to work for. And especially, and let's face it, when you work in sales, there are some people who like to go for sales for the wrong reasons. For example, they are only money driven, but they have no idea how to put any structure in there. Some people have seen Wolf of Wall Street and think that has anything to do with sales. Surprise, it has not. And then you have to pick the people who have a clue about the topic, who are driven by the right drivers, who you are able to lead, who want to be led by you, and then who want to work for your organization. And these 5 aspects alone are aspects which many leaders do not put in the right context. And sometimes I cannot blame them, because sometimes leaders work in an organization and they do not receive any kind of training. When we again look into science, CMI, the Chartered Management Institute in London, just published a study. 82% of leaders have received 0 minutes of leadership training or coaching.
Wow.
I mean, just imagine, let's say I want to do SaaS, and I just go to a company and say, hey, you do this kind of workday thing, or how is this called? Something with tech. I have no idea about this, but I love tech. Do you give me a job? You would say, no, this is not how it works. However, for whatever reason, and by the way, even for the most even for the most simple work, the first question is you ask people, why should I believe you that you are able to do this? And somehow, for whatever reason, we think leadership just happens. Learning by doing is the usual term they use. The right term is we don't want to invest in people. That's what we do. And learning by doing, of course, might work. The problem is when you do something wrong, what you see by a reaction of the other side, you now know, okay, that was wrong. What you still do not know is how to do it right. Why was it wrong? And then you have about 48 other options at hand where you think, okay, I can cross out this one, which did not work. So I have 47 other options. Hopefully next time I pick the right one. And this is how you simply burn people in your organization. You lose leaders, you lose talent, you lose your reputation on the market. And then suddenly you have people who are at some major expo and say, why do we have so many bad reviews on Kununu and Glassdoor.com? Well, guess why? And that is a crucial part which now changes slowly, but it changes too slow at a way too slow pace. People need to know that leaders aren't born. There are some people who have more talent or more empathy, and that, of course, might be helpful, but leaders are created by learning, not being born. If you look into scientific theories, greater man theory, etc., it all says there is no born leader.
Mm.
People always thrive on knowing what they do. So, of course, you need real world practice, no question about that. You need to apply everything in your organization, but you need the scientific evidence. There is a ton of people out there who call themselves leadership trainer, coaches, whatever, who never have been leaders, who never looked into leadership science. And yes, it's a lot of work. That's why you have people out there, qualified people out there who can help you with that. If you do not look into scientific evidence, you just have another opinion out there, and there's always another opinion on anything. Anyone today has an opinion on anything, and that becomes part of the problem. When you have leadership people out there who say, this magic phrase works every single time, that is where the problem begins. If someone tells me there is one phrase which works exactly the same with a white, straight, cisgender man and a black transgender woman, this person needs to be removed from any stage very quickly because you missed out on crucial parts, how society actually perceives people. And we all know sales is a lot about perception.
Mm-hmm. You already touched a very, very important part, especially of this podcast, like the regional areas, like how actually where the person comes from, how the person identifies, that is actually affecting how the person is communicating.
Yeah.
And I assume leading a French team compared to a German team compared to an English team is very different. What would you say are the differences, and how, for those people who are listening to the podcast, like how would you tackle a German-speaking team, a DACH team?
Well, when you are in Germany, of course, one thing you have to look for is structure. And we are pretty good with structure compared to internet. So I grew up in northern Germany, Hamburg. I was born in Hamburg, grew up quite close to it, then lived in Berlin, then moved to London, also lived in Spain for a while. Now I live in Zurich and London. So I worked in the US quite a lot for a tech company there. So I have quite some comparison here. We are pretty good at doing numbers and structure. That is the positive side of our cultural heritage. Let's put it that way. And by the way, we don't want to generalize. Not all Germans are XYZ, and not all British are XYZ, etc. So just giving rough guidelines here. However, we often miss out on the people side. When you see, for example, how well designed networks in the UK are, how people maneuver the art of sales without doing the 200 amounts of phone calls. They simply say, look, I know this person, that person gives me a reference to that person, and when this person references this person to me, then the sales is actually done, because when this person says, hey, you need this, the other person will probably comply because they are in good standing to each other. So there are many different approaches which we lack, and it's slowly changing. You see, for example, especially now when you look into the sales community, 15, 20 years ago, you didn't have initiatives like SDR and people meet in different locations. That simply didn't exist. Salespeople were very closeted, and they had their secrets and didn't share it with anyone. And that now changes because people know how important networks are. And let's face it, we got in touch by someone in our network as well. I was recommended to you by someone from your network. And due to that, you said, hey, let's work together here. And that is something where, in my opinion, in Germany, we still have a lot of potential. When you see how business networking, how crucial it is in the UK and how professionally it's done, we should not be surprised why every single time or every single year we have American and British brands coming to the German market and taking the market by storm.
Mhm.
While when you look at it vice versa, it happens a lot, well, that people approach the market but don't take it by storm. It is a lot more rare that German-speaking brands conquer the US world. When you only look in recruiting, Indeed.com 20 years ago, no one knew what Indeed was. Indeed came on the market and it just got the market very, very quickly. And lots of that is, of course, money is one part of that, but being excellent networking is another part. And I think that is where we need to enhance our skills. And one part of that is online networking on LinkedIn, for example. And some people do it very well. Some people put on LinkedIn, some people on LinkedIn just put their self-aggrandizing tosh on there. That's not the idea of LinkedIn. I mean, we know how many memes exist about LinkedIn for
Yeah.
a reason. So when you want to network online, you need to be careful what you put out there. When it's too self-centered, too promotional, or both, it doesn't work. When you put something on there too rarely, then no one's listening to you. When you're too frequent, no one's listening to you. So it is a very fine line to work. However, you need more than just online networking. You need to be able to network in reality, and that is something where, in my opinion, um, we are okay at that, but not great. Compared to the UK, for example, it's like comparing the Champions League to the Kreisliga. That's
Yeah.
where really
Like the
we,
regional
we
league. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
where we can really develop a lot further.
Yeah. You said so many points, and I was like kept on writing things down. I was like, brilliant. So the first thing that I want to cover is, so if I was to take over a team of French, English, American, and German, or
Mhm.
yeah, let's stick to German.
Yeah.
Um, I know for the German person in general, not to stereotype, but
Mhm.
in general, you could assume that person might need more structure and then get to meet the person, understand what do they really need. Maybe they need structure, and in that structure, they need the freedom to express themselves.
Mhm.
That's something like I, for instance, I need structure, but I
Mhm.
also need to have my ownership. I need to make
Yeah.
sure that in that structure, I own this. I can do what I want to do.
And that's also part of good leadership. When you, as a leader, think you need to control every single step
Yeah,
your salespeople do, first, I wish you good luck getting anything done
yeah,
because you probably can lead 3 to 4 people like that, but not 8 or 10 or
yeah,
15. And also, no one wants to work like that. It's basically micromanagement in a nutshell.
yeah,
So
yeah.
leave people with their freedom within certain boundaries.
I wonder now that you say that, I wonder that with leadership, is it is the cultural background that important, or is it more the human touch that is important? So is it more important? I'm just thinking, I feel like it's more important to have a one-to-one with your manager every month, every week, so that my manager gets to know me and then I am being managed rather than being terrified of the fact that, oh my goodness, I'm now having a team with someone who is like addressing the DACH market. I don't know the DACH market. So I
Mhm.
just gonna, give that person structure, or, give that person whatever, because that's what like the DACH market need. Um, how do you see that? How would you tackle that?
I think it's a both-sided game here. I give you a very simple example. So, for example, when I work in an interim project, which I do at the moment in the UK, then you, for example, receive feedback from your superior. And you need to learn the code, what Brits really mean when they say something. So when, for example, someone says, "Oh, thank you very much for putting all the effort into the report and the presentation. Very good ideas. Please send me the slide deck and I get back to you by next week." That feedback means rubbish. You missed the point. He will
Yeah.
not get back to you. You completely missed the point. And of course, either you learn the code of what they really mean. However, it is always possible, and that's something which I always recommend to leaders, adapt to the people you lead. So, for example, when I speak at a conference and I have British colleagues there and they say, "Hey, do you want feedback?" And there are always colleagues who I appreciate feedback from. So I tell them, "Yeah, please give me feedback."
Mm.
And then I always say, listen, I want feedback in a very specific way. Only mention the negative points. Anything else that you didn't mention automatically for me is good or excellent. So only mention the negative points because otherwise people start feedback like, "Oh, your speech, I think you had a really good opening." And my response to that inside myself as well, I'm doing this for more than 20 years. Would be pretty embarrassing if I couldn't open a speech by now, right? Would be a bit late to change that. So you can always ask people, how do you want to have feedback? How do you want to be led? So as you just said, you want to have freedom in certain boundaries within your dedicated space. Talk to people how they want to be led. Some people want to be led very tightly. Give me numbers, give me advice. Have a daily with me, or a weekly to stick to Scrum methods here. And other people say, look, I basically want to have a quarterly meeting with you, and as long as I meet the results, just let me in peace. Then, of course, you have to say, hey, I need a bit more numbers, because when you are about to miss your quarterly goal, I find out a week before the quarter ends, it might be a bit late to help you
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah.
you have to find a middle ground for that. But the key to that is talk to people and really offer them what is the way you want to be led. And many people are very surprised when they hear that, because often they are used to the following. They say, I get hired somewhere. They present a leader to me, and then I adapt my behavior to what the leader wants. Give you a very simple example of a company where, for example, some person said, the sales leader said, quality talks with clients mean you have an average phone call of 4 minutes or longer. My question then was, how do you get to the 4 minutes? Why is it 4 minutes, not five, and not three or eight or six and a
Yeah.
half? Where do you get the 4 minutes? It's my experience, he said. It's my experience is the equivalent to, I just made this up. There's no evidence to it. There's no proof. There's no science behind it. I just tapped the 4 minutes. And suspiciously to me, people had these numbers on a very high amount of talks. And you know, when you work in sales, you know that there are these calls. Hey, are you, hello? 2 seconds, they just hung up because they were annoyed. You
Yeah.
cannot have the average of 4 to 5 minutes every single time. And way too often people met this goal. So I wondered, could I please look into the data? And when I looked at the monthly data, I often saw beginning of the month, they were above or below the goal with lots of fluctuation. And the closer the end of the month went, the closer to the 4 minutes they got. And what happened was, when people were above that, they did deliberate short calls to the movie hotline and just hung up. Clack, 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 clack. Okay, and now I'm at 4 minutes 34. So that's within the boundaries my sales manager set me. When your talks were too short, then they said, oh, I'm going to call the movie hotline for an hour. And then my average is exactly where it should be. So when you just blindly give numbers, when there is no scientific proof, no evidence, no rationale behind what you say, then people will make the numbers look like you want. As soon as you tell people it needs to look like XYZ, then people make it look like XYZ. And that happens on many different levels, not only in sales. When we look at Volkswagen, do you really think that no engineer in the whole company said, like, I think what we're doing here might not be that legal? Maybe, this thing that we just built in there, I don't think
Yeah.
that's the idea.
Yeah.
But probably these people got told, when you say something like that, you have to leave. So what happens is suddenly people just comply with what some senior executive says.
Yeah.
Everything you give as a leader needs to be fully transparent. It needs to be plausible, and the burden of proof is with you. The time that you can simply say, my experience tells me, or I'm in the market for 20 years, so, or my personal preference, my gut feeling says. Gut feelings surprisingly always align with the belief system of the manager that says them. So you
Yeah.
get it your way because your gut feeling surprisingly complies with you.
Yeah.
When you look at, for example, Professor Cunning valuing HR work, and he always says when people in HR do something wrong, the best thing is to say, hey, we tried this. It was not right. We're sorry for that. We wasted money, but now we're moving on doing it better in the future. What happens in reality is people say, we made good experiences with that. Our leadership training is with horses, and people lead horses around somewhere, and then they become good leaders. Then you look into science, find out zero scientific evidence for this approach. But often people say, we made good experiences with that. And then Professor Cunningham always says, well, you're looking back at your own work. When you look at your own work, you most likely will not look back and say, looking at my last 2 years are pretty rubbish, I think. No one will get to that conclusion because you risk your job.
Mm.
And this kind of confirmation bias that we have there often happens in sales as well. People who are very close to the client, who talk to clients all day long, see certain tendencies. How does a client want to be contacted? How long do they want to be contacted? What is the frequency they want to be contacted? And then someone who just does a sales manager's or sales leader's or sales director's job for a decade says, oh no, we always called them 4 times a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone says, look, they told me not to call again before next quarter. Oh, you call them. I'm sure they do something with you. Yeah, they hung up.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
hang up and tell you that I told you not to call and you called. So
Yeah.
thank you. That was it for you.
Yeah. So what I'm taking away is the first one is one-on-one leadership, like making sure that you get to know the
Yeah.
person to understand, okay, how do they want to communicate? And here, if there's someone,
One-to-ones are very important. Yeah.
yeah, super, super crucial. Because like for instance, I need the shit sandwich. I need someone to tell me I did something good and that's not good. And then I
Okay.
would naturally be like, I will naturally drive to that one negative thing and I will revise over and over. And it's like, okay, cool.
Mhm.
This is it. But I still feel fine. So this is so interesting. And we're both, we're both from the DACH area, so from
Yeah.
the DACH region. So again, guys, yes, there are stereotypes, and stereotypes are made out of an average of thousands of points of data. So make sure you have that one-on-one and get to know the person. The other point that I take away is the data. Like, don't do it because it was always done like that. If that was the case, you would still use horses to go to work. So
Exactly.
we have to change that, look at the data. And I love the 3 points that you said. Leadership is fully transparent, plausible, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I literally wrote that down, but there was so much
Yeah.
that you said. Responsibility of outcome lies with you as a leader.
And
Is
the
that
burden of proof lies with you. The
burden,
burden of
burden
proof
of
lies
proof,
with you. The
burden
burden
of,
of proof lies with you. So
burden of
when
proof.
you make some claim, you need to tell people where does this come from. So for example, if you as a sales executive say, hey, a study in exactly our industry just got to the conclusion that the best talking time to a client is 4 minutes 30. They
Yeah,
evaluated 10,000 phone calls and that's the result. Perfect. When you say 4 minutes talk time and someone says why, and you say that's my experience,
yeah,
or someone else has a different experience. Where do these spawn? Maybe, and then people love to just stick a pole in the ground and say that's it. Maybe you heard of, oh, the first impression is just 7 seconds. Nowhere in science you find these 7 seconds, but people, numbers between seven or more somehow ring a bell with people. Yeah, there are 4 personality types. No, surprise. We can't shut down the Department of Psychology because we now figured out by a personality test of 45 minutes how to run psychology. Um, but the problem is some people are anti-science because it is a lot of work. And I don't say that you need to have a scientific degree. There are degrees, there are certificates, there are courses by universities. There is something like Coursera or edX. There are
mm,
many vendors there that give you access to scientific data. You don't need to read through a 4,000-page PDF if you don't like to. But when
mm,
you deny science, you will always be the runner-up at the end of any game because people who
mm,
rely on science in the long run always win because they go by the facts and not by some sort of feeling.
yeah, yeah. Super, super interesting. I guess I feel like the reason why people start making those rules or like start saying, okay, there are 4 types. This is my framework. This is the ladder to success, whatever. This is
Yeah,
the 3 steps to whatever. I think it like you gotta kind of, I assume you gotta kind of find a way of being personal and scalable,
yeah,
especially when a team is growing. So when you out of nowhere, and we have enough teams when a leader out of nowhere of like 15 people. If I did a one-to-one every week with everyone, I can't get the work done, do the
yeah,
dashboards on Salesforce, look at the data, etc., etc. So I need to find a way to be as personal and individualized as possible while still scale with the company. What like because I know you're working with that, like the pillar and the house, right? The building and
yeah.
the house. Can you talk me through that and explain the listeners a bit about, how you usually give a specific framework to help people be as personalized as needed to still grow and scale?
Yeah, so the pillar model of leadership, you mean, right?
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. So this pillar model has a very important point. Often when people say, "Hey, there's a 2-day leadership training," people want to have something that sums it up. So
Yeah.
I came up with the idea of a house. A house is so first, house needs to have a good foundation. Your foundation as a leader is your legitimization. If you are not legitimized on a formal and social level, both, not just one of them, then no one will follow you anywhere. Being
Yeah.
legitimized on a formal level because you are the senior vice president of global sales operations excellence director, whatever title you can add to that at the end of the day, is nice, but the generations that are listening to hierarchy are, I don't want to say dying out because that's too brutal, but they are leaving the job market. So
Yeah.
more and more people say formalities are nice, but many people also, meanwhile, due to transparency that we have, say, I know how you became vice president. Your parents paid you Stanford, and from Stanford you become vice president. So your achievement was you basically got the money of your parents and moved onto the job market. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So next to the formal level is the social level. And social level of legitimization is what is the skill you bring to the table? What is the track record that you actually have? When they see you talking to the client, do you actually convince clients? Are you able to present and sell and close the deal in front of others? Because if not, why should someone take you seriously if suddenly you do not even know your own product very well? A very well-known car company, which I didn't want to mention by name, a board level member of that company just a couple of weeks ago said on an international press conference, we are selling less cars because the market just isn't there anymore. The first thing you will never let any AE off the hook with is when they sit in front of you and say, oh, the market is just not there anymore. You will say, we need a different approach than you telling me there is no market anymore. And suddenly on board level, you hear this phrase. What sign do you send to your sales team now when you say the market for our product isn't there anymore? Well, then we can actually stop selling it, right? Because if you say there's no market anymore, it's
Yeah.
not looking great, is it? So that's the foundation. And then you have different pillars. So, for example, you need to be able to provide transformational and transactional leadership. You need to be able to stick to motivational leadership, which is the motive, the inner mission of different people. You need to be able to have a situational approach, and all of that taken together is what we call leadership. When you ask people what is leadership, most people can't give you an answer. Most people stick to metaphors, stereotypes, something they read in an internet meme or some motivational, inspirational quote. When you have people who tell you, I just give you one example. Find something you love and you will never have to work again. When leaders bring you to the place that you love what you do, so you will never have to work again, then that's leadership. And who said the quote, when you find something that you love and you will never have to work again, that is what Confucius said. My first question as an AE would be, how often did Confucius have to sell digital sales rooms? How many? And I think zero. So what is
Yeah.
that quote about? So
Yeah.
people just stick to stereotypes, and often these stereotypes are very person and ego driven. And that's a very simple phrase that sums it up. Personality is a good thing. So personality promotes, but ego eliminates your business. When you are a sales leader and you put your personality forward, you will find people who follow you. When you put your ego forward and you want to be the rock star of the organization, anyone says, oh, look at our sales leader. That's not your job. Sales leadership means you go out of the spotlight, you empower others to become the rock stars of the organization for sales, but you have to put your own ego aside. And that's why so many people who work in sales fail on sales leadership level. And also, many people way too late because often they didn't get prepared very well. Someone does a reasonable job as an AE, so they become a senior AE or a senior SDR, whatever else, any title you can put there. And suddenly they say, well, you do a good job, you become a leader in our sales. You're going to lead 3 people. And suddenly they realize, oh, it's a lot of reporting. It's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of analysis. It's a lot of data science, actually. Yes, that's what sales leadership is about. You have to find structure, ideas, and approaches to empower others to sell the product on the ground with clients. I have probably seen anything in between 10 to 30%, depending on the industry, of salespeople actually succeeding in a sales leadership role. Some of them because they weren't prepared very well, some of them because they didn't receive professional training, but a lot of them because many enjoy that they have these look at who just closed the business, and that is, let me check, me. And many people enjoy this, which is fair enough. I worked for Microsoft. We had different bells on the wall. You can ring the small bell and the big bell and the alarm bell when you close more than 100,000 or 1 million. And people love these moments. When you want to have these moments, sales leadership is not for you. And by the way, there is no shame in that. Especially when people are money driven, the differences between sales and sales leadership and sales aren't as big as you think. You can make a lot of money when you're a good salesperson selling on an operational level. And also when you lead people, people come with their problems. They say, hey, I need a day off because my dog needs to go to the vet. Oh, sorry, here I have some school event with my children. And you just want to sit there and do sales. No, people unload everything they have with you. And that's something you need to do as well. And this house model sums it all up. So when I deliver a 2-day training, for example, or a coaching or whatever, people want to have some sort of picture which they can take with them. And that's how I came up with a house model. Because when you have complex knowledge, one of the main jobs you have to do as a coach or a trainer or consultant, name it as you like, also as a speaker, is reduction of complexity. You explain a very complex model, but people need to take away something which cannot be the impression of, wow, that's complex.
Yeah.
Wow, that's complicated. So you need to have some sort of picture to reduce the level of complexity to make it digestible for your audience.
Yeah. Guys, if you're interested in that and learning the different pillars and understanding more about Niels' approach, I link his masterclass in the notes. So you have direct access to the masterclass. It is an absolute game changer. Honestly, I sat behind the camera when you were doing it and I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like I did so much wrong. And why did I ever mention that? And why didn't I do that? Etc. etc. It's fascinating, especially the data approach and the psychological approach. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Thank you very much.
Guess with that, because we talk about, okay, cool. You have to have the one-to-one, you have to have the data, you have to have like, even like as a leader, I feel like you also have to make something complex into cool. And this is what the actual steps need to be. Let's just say you are having a team for the DACH market, but you're not from the DACH market. And the reason why I'm asking that is because my manager wasn't from the DACH market and he was managing me and he did a great job. I really loved him as a manager. He enabled me. He saw my potential. He saw when I had a self-doubt. It was great.
Good to hear. Excellent.
Yeah, he was brilliant. Until today, I'm his biggest fan. Will, if you hear that, that was me, Helena. So how do you feel like, how important though is it as a leader to understand the market that your seller is selling into? Or do you feel like as a leader, just trust your seller? If your seller is telling you that's not working in that market, then don't second guess it. Like how do you approach that?
There's a reason why we have companies, for example, like Gartner or Nielsen, that gives you valid and reliable data on different market approaches, how you distribute projects on certain levels. So the first approach is always data. When someone says, is there a market? Look at the data first. Data-driven decision-making is extremely important. However, of course, when, for example, you look into Switzerland, where you have different cantons, different legislation, different languages, you have German in one area, you have Italian in the south, you have French in the west, you have Romansh, Rätoromanisch, Rätoromanic in the center, then you need to know that you need to deal with locals. So when, for example, and this can be extremely local, when you only go in Germany and let's say someone from Düsseldorf calls someone in Cologne, and they get by the accent, hey, you are the Düsseldorf guy. That is the end of your sales call if they don't. So, and as a Northern German, I am fully aware of the fact that my accent in the UK is not the most popular one, and it gives me a disadvantage I have to deal with. And of course, when you use humor, humor works. However, Northern Germans are not known for being the most funny. Actually, Germans are known for their humor, to be fair. So I took humor classes in the UK to learn how humor works in business in the UK. When you want to approach a market, first you go for the data, then you go for experienced people who work in the industry for a while. However, everything they do, when someone says, oh, in my opinion, only that approach works, the first question is, how do you get to that point? And when they say, hey, with this client and this client and this client, I did this and it only worked that way. Thank you. That's the evidence we're looking for. The burden of proof is with you. So go by data first, Then you take the experience on top of that. And then you need good people who really locally know how businesses work, who know how is the local network organized, who works with whom. So you go from the top level down to the local level. You have to tick all boxes. When you have a great data approach, but you have no experience, people will not have any contacts, and you start from the scratch, which takes way longer. When you have great data and you have great experience, but you don't lead your local people very well, you will lose salespeople. And anyone knows when you as a client suddenly have 3 people within 1 year who want to acquire you as a client, it's not going too well in that business because people are leaving left, right, and center. So you need to tick all of these boxes to have an approach which actually works. When I had market entry in the UK, I came from Germany, and let's face it, no one, absolutely no one is waiting for Niels Brabandt entering the UK or the US market telling them how to do leadership. No one is waiting. You have Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Yale, they all explain leadership very, very well. No one is waiting for a German dude with a German accent and no sense of humor telling them how to lead their people. You need to have a local understanding, and then you go through the market. But data comes first. Before I entered the UK, I did a massive analysis of data, and that's why we started with London. From a rental point of view, from any kind of cost, from cost of living, it would have been cheaper to start with Edinburgh or Glasgow or Liverpool or Manchester or Birmingham or whatnot. But everything in the UK connects in the core point. You always end up in London. So, and when you then say, hey, this is Niels Brabandt who lives in Berlin and I want to have London business, good luck. I don't think that this will work. So when I told my people we're opening our headquarters in London, the first one who needs to move is the leader. Leaders just have to live. I mean, leading by example is not a new concept. So I moved there, and yeah, went pretty well from there.
Why did you ever go to the UK? Why did you not stay in DACH?
I looked into the market, and when you deliver training, you have a German market. So you have roughly 80 million people in Germany. Then you add Switzerland, which is less than 10 million, Austria. So, but you see it's a pretty closed down market. And then you see, so where else can we go? And then of course, the very first thing you think of, how is training knowledge transferred? It's by language. So you look into the big language market, you can have a Chinese entry. However, my skill in Chinese is very limited, meaning none. So that was not on the table. So the options were Spanish and English. And then you look into data, and the Spanish market is there. There's a huge Spanish education market. However, it roughly pays, depending on which region you enter, between a third to half less than the English-speaking market. So it was an economic approach. And also, once you conquered the English-speaking world as someone who's a non-native speaker, you gain a lot of trust with international clients. So I just give you one very simple example. And let's just say I'm an HR leader in a company. And then I have, okay, we have these 3 experts. We could book one of them for our sales training. Okay, one is living in London, sales trainer. One is living in Berlin, but they say he speaks reasonable English, or she. And the other one is living in Scandinavia. They will always pick the one with the native approach because they want to reduce risks. So companies that never wanted to hire me before, as soon as I lived in London, suddenly the door was open, because anyone knows when you're in London and you can't speak English very well, you starve. Very simple. You starve. End of story. And that's how I went to the UK, and it was a lot of work. That's something which people always underestimate. You do your cold calls, you do your meetings, you have daytime meetings, you have evening lunches, you have network meetings. So it is a ton of work, no matter where you start. No one is waiting for you. That's the first approach you always have to see. No one is waiting for you. No matter what project you or product you have, no one waits for you knocking on their door.
Yeah. I love that your approach as well started with data. Like, look at the data. Where do you want to go? And if that's what you want, then look at the data, the status quo in a way of today.
Yeah.
And then how do you get there? What is the quickest win to get there? I love that. Seeing as you have been in business since 1998, and you've seen so many different styles, what would you say, what style of leadership is there? And what do you feel like works best in DACH?
Okay, there are about a million different leadership styles. So the
I
very
expect
first
a
of all,
list, Niels.
yeah,
So
yeah. So for the next 4 hours, please take note. It's nota bene.
ChatGPT.
So very important is there is not this one leadership style. And very important is when you want to have the right leadership style, advice number one is never start from your point of view. As soon as leaders say something like, I just give you an example. Helena, I'm more the authoritarian type. Sometimes I get a bit loud. It's nothing personal, just that you know in advance. I sometimes am a bit loud and a bit harsh. It's just how I am. When leaders announce misbehavior up front, it doesn't make it any better. It makes it worse. When I punch someone in the face on the open street, then I get punished. But when I say tomorrow I'm going to punish you, tomorrow I'm going to punch you in the face, it gets worse because I announced my misbehavior deliberately. So when people know they are a bit loud and a bit harsh, yeah, work on that.
Yeah.
You have to adapt your leadership style to what your people need. Sometimes you have the exact same problem, and with one person, you need to be very authoritarian. Tell them, look, your problem is you don't call enough. You have 10 calls, that's why you miss your goal. Do 50 calls a day, full stop. And other people with the exact same problem want to have a more cooperative or a more permissive approach, where you say, "What's your take on that? What do you think we could do?" Because that's the way they want to be led. There is never that one style. The outdated advice, and that survived until the end of the 90s. So we still have leaders in the field who work according to that principle if they didn't get any additional training. Until the 90s, business schools taught people and told them, find your leadership style and then just keep it because people like it when you are predictable. That was a piece of advice that was given to managers until the end of the 90s, which is simply outdated. Because
Mm.
many people said, yeah, I'm more the laissez-faire person. I just give them a goal and then whatever they do, I don't care. They just have to meet the goal. And that is then people often don't feel taken care of. There
Mm.
isn't this one approach. You have to look at your team. You have to speak to every single of your team members and then adapt your leadership style to what these people need. That does not mean you always need to be liked. That does not mean you cannot criticize people. That does not mean you can't change things. And especially it does not mean that that you cannot tell people you did something wrong. However, telling them that they did something wrong has different approaches. And you need to find the right approach. How does someone wants to be led? So, for example, when I have my interim mandates, I always tell people, and I always have to tell them 5 times because they think I'm not serious. I tell them, be straightforward. When you stand in my office, just tell me, hey, the server's down, this client needs to be called, that needs to be done. And when you say these 3 things, I know everything else is perfectly doing well. But that approach to feedback is not for everyone. As you
Mm.
said, you probably like when people tell you you've done something good. Maybe due to my northern German nature, when someone doesn't, when someone tells me ABC is bad, I know, okay, so D, E, F, G, L, blah, 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 until that is great. I just
Mm.
assume that this is because you didn't mention that there's any problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So find your style, however, adapt your style to the people you're leading. It is possible that you have a very successful style of leadership. You switch companies and suddenly everything you did doesn't work, although you're working in the exact same industry and just switch jobs to a competitor, but they have completely different people, a different culture. So you need to take a different approach.
Yeah. You you said something that stuck with me. Never start with your own point of view,
Yeah.
which coming back to what we said at the beginning as well, it's like, okay, cool, you need to give your team the space, right? So
Mhm.
rather than starting with your own point of view, like open the space up for their point of view.
Exactly.
Give
So
them a space. Sorry.
yeah, Professor Tsedal Neely, because I have to give the quote here. I derived my quote from someone else's quote. There is an excellent book which is called Remote Work Revolution, written by Professor Tsedal Neely, Harvard University professor. So she knows what she's doing there. There's a ton of study behind that book. And we all know how many arguments we today have about remote work, although there's scientific proof that remote work works. Some companies have very interesting approaches to how much work remotely they allow and where and whatnot. And Professor Tsedal Neely said one very important phrase during one of her speeches, and she said, it's never about you. Once you think, for example, as a leader, yeah, well, I think work happens in an office. I think work is when you see people. I think work is when you meet people. I think that so no one cares. It's
Mm.
not about you. You have to lead a team. And anyone knows when in today's times you tell, especially young people, hey, we have a 100% on-site approach. I wish you great recruiting budgets because anyone knows you're going to need them. You're going to need them to find anyone with that approach.
Mm. Mm.
So it's never about you. It's just a core aspect. Leadership is so ego driven. We have a rising number of leaders showing sociopathic, psychopathic, or narcissistic behavior. When you look into studies, the lowest number you find is 2% on highest level. That's every 50th leader. The highest number you find in certain industries are numbers between 6 to 8%. That is nearly every 10th person being unsuitable, unfit for work, unsuitable for work, and they're still there chasing people away left, right, and center. And then suddenly you wonder why your business isn't going well. So
Mm.
you need to adapt to the people. It's never about you.
I can imagine, especially with the ego part, and I 100% agree. Ego is usually the thing that, well, often, not usually, but
Yeah.
often I find the thing that is the reason why businesses don't work.
Yeah, I
So,
give you a very simple example from my industry. When you look at trainers, coaches, speakers, websites, or Instagram profiles, you sometimes wonder how could the world economy survive before these people were born? That's basically how they present themselves. And one question I always wonder about is, so could you please tell me what are the top 5 Insta accounts of the worldwide best consultants from McKinsey, Boston Consulting, and Accenture? And people say, I have no idea. Maybe they aren't on Insta. And maybe there's a reason for that because it is not about you and your ego. What happens is when, especially when you have the people who call themselves keynote only speaker. Keynote only means you can't handle criticism and you have no didactical means to transfer knowledge beyond your personal ego. So when you have people pushing their ego forward, look at this and special offer here, and this is only with me, and only with me you learn XYZ, you don't see these people on board level. You don't see these people leading the world's economy. These people sell to desperate people close to the consumer market who think, and they only play on FOMO, fear of missing out.
mm,
They think with this magic online class, you can get rich quick. And
mm,
here are the news. There is no way to get rich quick except winning the lottery or inheritance. So
yeah,
these are not ways of where you earn something. You were just the lucky one.
yeah, yeah.
So it's never about you. As soon as you see that people put these, I'm award winning here, I'm this, I'm that, and it's all without any proof and evidence. Number one expert. Everyone is a number one expert. One of the most funniest moments I found during one of the Zukunft Personal, one of the
Mm.
people development's leading conferences. And one speaker opened the speech with, well, I think I'm the 5th best expert because you now had 3 number one experts after another. So I can only be number 5, right? That was the best answer to all 3 people they had before.
Yeah,
You think it's all about you, you are a victim to some lunatic
yeah,
unconscious bias and you will fall hard. The question is not if, the question is only when. You have
yeah,
brilliant people out there who do amazing work and you do not even know their names in public because they say, my job is to deliver great work and then I get good money for that. And in return, my company gets great results. End
yeah.
of end of job.
Yeah, I feel like with an ego, though, I think there are like the first thing that you think of is the person who's like, I am the best. But I
Yeah.
think the other things that people don't really realize, especially as a leader, is like a people pleaser, for instance.
Yeah.
Someone is like, oh, I don't want to step on any, I want to be liked. That's an ego thing.
Hmm.
I want to not fall out, I want to be liked. So I guess that brings me to my next question. What do you like, especially being promoted to leader out of the same team?
Yeah.
Were your friends. You
Hmm.
want to be liked. You want to be invited to the pub afterwards. You want to
Yeah.
have a pint with them. You want to be part of the, you know, after work chat. But you
Yeah.
also know you kind of can't really because you're also the leader and you have to honor the other person in the team that
Yeah.
the rest of the team doesn't like. Like the people pleaser vibe. How do you
Yeah.
what's your advice to the people who are being promoted out of a team as their new leader?
Yeah, so first, when you insist on being the person who wants to be liked and always be part of the chat and the afternoon pub session, then you shouldn't go for leadership. There will be moments, and I give you a very simple moment. Let's say you do your job really well and everything goes smooth. You don't have to be a great leader when things go well. Basically anyone can lead a team when things go well. There will be a moment, it's just a matter of time when the economy dips. Sooner or later, the economy in your industry dips for whatever reason. And then you have to take harsh decisions. That means longer work, less benefits, less extras. Not everyone can be part of the great party that we have after the expo in December. Not anyone can go to the conference in Vegas. Yeah, but before we did. Yeah, but now we don't because the economy dipped. And that means people will not like you for the decision. Here are the news. You get a better compensation when you are a leader. Guess why? It is not because you have a better brain and you are Mr. Super Genius. You for sure have dedicated skills which justify a part of the better compensation. But part of the better compensation is the inconvenience of sometimes not being liked.
Mm.
I have been, as a leader, uninvited from a birthday party of a good friend for 1 year due to disagreements we had in business. So for 1 year, I couldn't go to that friend's birthday party. And I had to live with that. And if you can't live with that, I'm sorry, it's just then you must be the lucky person who never has an economy dipping. If you think there's a magic way that anyone will accept your criticism or your decisions just by the magic word or the magic phrase of this and that chat, that doesn't exist. You will sooner or later have people who do not like you. No one needs to hate you. You don't need to deliberately offend someone or anything. That is also nonsense. However, sometimes you need to make harsh decisions. I give you a very simple example. When you have your sales goals not met, and for example, at Microsoft, we had that, for example, that sales leader said, hey, if we meet our goal, you can have a Friday off. So Friday, the last Friday of the month, will be off. And then they were close to the goal. And because every single month before they met the goal, so they expected the Friday will be off, we are close enough. And people say, hey, we have 96% goal achievement. And he said, yeah, and 4% are missing. And as long as I don't have orders for 4% on the market by Thursday evening, we all see each other on Friday.
Yeah.
And then some people said, well, but I already booked flights at noon. And he said, well, so first, that was not pre-agreed. And
Yeah.
second, I can't help with that. Tomorrow is just the usual working day when we don't hit the goal. And they didn't in that month. You're not the popular person then.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it happens. Always very important. Be reasonable, try to be friendly, don't be harsh. The burden of proven evidence is always with you, but show the consequences when they are needed. This part of inconvenience is part of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super important to know before you want to go for leadership roles,
Yeah.
because I think we are living in a society when it is all about growing and promotion. And, if you're longer in the role of an SDR, you are failing longer than 12 months.
Yeah.
If, but then AE, sometimes you stay in the AE role for 100 years because it is making good money. But technically, you are supposed to go to head of sales, because head of sales, then you're the big babo, right? Like then
Yeah.
you're the big man, big woman, whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, that is the moment when you give back. That's the moment when you enable people, when you have to step back so that someone else can come in to do good work, which
Yeah.
I guess is quite interesting especially with the generational changes, because I know my dad was definitely differently managed than I
Hmm.
am managed today. And I know my daughter or son or like my child will be differently managed
Yeah.
to how I was managed.
Yeah.
What would you predict? Like, what do you think are the next management styles
Yeah.
that might be needed that we haven't had so far, especially for Gen Z? Gen Z?
Yeah. So when you look at, and again, surprise, here we have the data. When you look at data, we will have less talent on the market. We have less workforce on the market. At the same time, we have political movements which go towards tighter border controls and less immigration, which is probably the most stupidest idea people had for the last 70 years. But don't get me started on that. So we will have less talent available on the market. So clients will see that probably customer service will go a bit down because you have less people available who can deal with clients. But companies who hire talent will need to go above and beyond to get the right talent on board. And I just give you an overview of what we had since Brexit, which is still unbelievable when you talk to Germans. So, for example, when I hire an SDR person, I think the person is really good. I give them signing bonuses. So, for example, I say, Helena, we think you should take the job. Here's our offer. You get £5,000 bonus when you sign within the next 48 hours. And then you will say, yeah, but I have an interview on Monday. Yeah, we know. 5 grand is 5 grand. So what do you think? So signing bonuses. We suddenly pay people to do interviews. We pay when they insist on it, 50 to 150 pound compensation for the time doing an online interview. So companies and their leaders need to adapt to the situation that it is companies applying at the talent pool, not vice versa. Once you have people in there, you need to be aware that you need to manage expectations. When anyone is obsessed with growth, and there's an amazing book which is called Toxic Positivity, where anyone needs to be positive and about growth. Everything is only positive all day long, which is, by the way, psychologically harming when you show this behavior, because negativity is part of life, and it's perfectly fine to feel negative from time to time. And you sometimes need that to process certain things.
Yeah.
When you have people who are all obsessed with careers, let's face it, there is a reason why an org chart looks like a pyramid when you go to the top. You can't say we have 8 amazing talents and we promote 8 people. And by the way, sometimes organizations do that only to keep the talent, and only that's one warning sign I always want to give to people, one warning message. When you get promoted quite quickly, believe me, when the economy dips, your job is the first one being gone. When you are the first contact cold caller, believe me, you have your job until the end of all days, because no one wants to do cold calling. I like it. I don't know why people don't like it. I like the challenge. However, when you have that skill, you will have that job. Maybe you don't make a fortune like others or make as much as others do. However, others suddenly face unemployment once the economy dips and you don't. That's also part of the deal. So we will see management styles that adapt more to the people. We will have an ongoing discussion where people will always claim no one wants to work anymore. On one of my podcasts, I said that I looked up when for the first time did someone say no one wants to work anymore, and I found a source that was in industrialized Britain in 1711, and I thought that was the first one. However, a historian listened to my podcast, and the very first source which said no worker wants to work anymore was found in a city called Ur, which is in today's Iran, 4,000 years before Christ was born. So for about 6,000 years, no one wants to work anymore. Looking out of the window, I think we're doing reasonably okay for that.
Yeah.
For the fact that for 6,000 years, no one is working, we did reasonably okay, I think.
Yeah.
So we will see leadership styles that adapt to the talent. However, there will always be an ongoing conflict. I just give you a couple of topics. Remote work, work from anywhere, 4-day working week. That alone are 3 bullet points that can make a whole board level meeting explode completely. But we will see different models of working, because it is not even remotely on the horizon that the number of people being born in the country goes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the talent and workforce shortage will go on. We have, by the way, we have a declining number of people studying because we have more expenses connected to studying. So it becomes more difficult for many people to study. When now people think, well, then we probably pay them less. Yeah, guess who needs to requalify them afterwards? So maybe you pay them a bit less when they have the entry-level job, and I don't think this will happen that you pay them less because the shortage is too harsh. Then you have to requalify them, and that is the money you saved in the first place. So management styles need to adapt to cater to the people you want to attract, and then retain and develop them well. I just give you another example, which hopefully will disappear in the next 10 years, although I doubt it, especially in Germany, where they have sometimes very special budget planning. Someone says, hey, I have an offer on the table. Here's the proof. They pay me 20,000 more per year. I don't want to leave, but I think it's a fair game that I ask for, match this offer. And they say, oh, we don't have budget for that. Sorry. So you quit. And as soon as you quit, they say, well, I matched the other offer, where you think, where did the magic money tree just pop
Yeah,
up? Could,
yeah,
could you please tell me? And then the answer often is, and that is a shocking truth, especially in the German-speaking world, where people say the budget for salary adaptation, the budget for salary raises is 10 times less than the budget for talent acquisition or retainment. So as soon as someone wants to quit or someone gets hired, there's a way higher budget connected to that compared to salary raises. And I always wonder who decides these budgets.
yeah. If there
Because
is,
when you have someone who leaves your organization, I mean, probably you know that vacancy calculators are now available, where you can see what does it cost you to have an open position. And just because you hired someone doesn't mean that you have someone. They need to be trained, onboarded. It probably can,
yeah,
depending on the complexity of your product and your market, it can take anything in between 6 months to 2 years before they can work on their own. And only when they can work on their own, then you found the new talent. So
yeah,
usually you say when you lose someone, it costs you an annual salary, but today you could even say very easily can cost you more than that.
yeah. I feel like if there's anyone out there working in a German company, hearing that, make sure that you adapt your budgets.
Yeah.
Change
Or
the
simply
bar.
just stop splitting the budgets between salary raises and a
Yeah,
talent acquisition. Just have to have a talent budget where you say this is connected to anything with salary.
yeah,
One budget, and
yeah.
there you are.
I guess one question that popped up with all of the generational sides and how technology changed, how like the internet has changed the sales process completely. Because now it became a or it started as a the seller has all of the information, now the customer has all of the information, and I need
Yeah,
to educate them. I need to talk them through the information rather than
yeah,
educate them, rather than add more to it, because they will Google. And
yeah,
now we are changing to a company uh, like a employee facing world, when at the beginning every employee wanted to work for that company, or every woman every person wanted to go and interview and like work for that big company. And now the big company is like, let me find the talents.
yeah.
Hello
Yeah, you have
everyone.
very few companies who still have enough applications and say we are so cool and so much in
Yeah,
demand that enough
exactly.
people showing out
Oh,
or showing up. It's
100%. But with that change, I can imagine that, or I already see it really. I see it that sales is changing into the social media world. So now people are selling on Instagram, on TikTok, on
yeah,
Twitter, etc. And you're just like, wow, wow, when did that? And I'm 29 years old and I didn't
yeah,
see that coming. That was within a year or so. I felt
yeah.
like I blinked and out of nowhere, I'm selling my product on Instagram, and not even on I have a product page, but on a sellers are building a personal brand on their social media to then sell Salesforce or,
Yeah.
big companies like that. How do you feel like, because I do feel like sales leaders probably should have an understanding of what's going on, like how sales is changing, what tools there are, what tools they should use, they shouldn't use, how AI can actually help sales incredibly much. Like yesterday, I talked to Thibaut Souris about AI in sales in DACH and how you actually just scrape data, how you can use that
Hmm.
to be much more efficient. And I guess, long story short, my question is, how do you feel like the new world is affecting leadership and how leaders should enable their sellers knowing all of this, which can be very overwhelming, I assume?
Yeah. So first you need to focus on certain channels and also, and that is of course very important. Let's face it, some people are very good at using the social media channel, and then there's one department that comes into place, and that's compliance. And they say, oh no, you can't do funny memes. That's not compliant. We have this amazing picture which marketing created, which shows our product and a nice tagline. Could you post that, please? And of
Yeah.
course, it doesn't work that way, especially not on Instagram or TikTok. So leaders need to adapt to that world. So first, get the knowledge, but second, get the data where your clients hang out. That was a big topic when, for example, people were looking for sales talents. And one example, Königsteiner, which is the largest agency for advertising when you want to attract talent. And they had a booth at the Zukunft Personal, which is Europe's largest talent fair, largest people development fair. And many people showed up, leaders saying, we need to be on Instagram with our job ad. And then they pull out a laptop and say, okay, which industry do you work in? Okay, what kind of people do you look like? Are you looking for what kind of qualification? Through a couple of things. And then they said, okay, here are the news. Your people aren't on TikTok. And your people aren't on Instagram. You need to go for example, LinkedIn. But sometimes when you, for example, say, hey, we need trainees, they most likely are on TikTok. They most likely are on Instagram. I see way too many companies just playing on all pitches they see and on all play fields they can get because they have the money, and then wonder why they lack results. Get the data. Where do your clients hang out? Very simple. So I give you an example which many people couldn't even think of. When I was looking for an MBA, I did an MBA, just passed it last week, so I'm in a good mood. And
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And then people asked, so how did you find your MBA? And I said, on Instagram. And they said, how did you look for an MBA on Instagram? No, of course I didn't. Of course I didn't. I was doing Googling, looked at different MBAs, and yeah, that's okay, but no, this is not really, that is okay, but not really. And suddenly I got an ad from Duchera Business School, University of East London, where they say executive MBA with focus on international business leadership and finance, where I said, that is, I wanted international business and leadership. Okay, finance, I can make bearable. I'm not a finance. I'm not a finance specialist, and I'm not going to pretend I am. So I went on their website where they had a dedicated landing page where, of course, they said, hey, here's general information. You can download the brochure. Of course, for the brochure, you gave them the email address and the phone number. And then they said, do you want to talk to one of our advisors? It's only 15 minutes. I said, yeah, I mean, 15 minutes isn't much, so 15 minutes is okay. So first, it took 45 minutes, but I was so interested in what they offered. A university, a traditional university that was not founded 2019, a traditional university somehow knew that I am hanging out on Instagram because I met certain criteria. And they converted that into a massive 5-digit amount of tuition fees. But of course, some people might download the brochure and say, not for me. Or they talk to the advisor and say, not what I'm looking for. So they know that you don't get 100% hit rate. But they found the talent they were looking for via Instagram. When I talk to German universities and say, do you want to do Insta ads? They look at me like I'm talking about the moon landing or the Mars landing, better to say. So it's very important, get the data first. Where do your people hang out? When you sell digital sales rooms, I am pretty sure that these people hang out on LinkedIn. Just wild guess here that this is not data. When you, for example, say, well, my digital product is a product which enhances photos for people when they are on vacation, so they get a nice book before they return home. So it's B2C market, probably more of a TikTok thing, because TikTok is the typical thing where you put these kind of things on. That's something you need to find out. Get the data first. Don't just join social media because you think you have to. But then the next thing is, of course, you need guidelines. And I understand the worries that organizations have. But when you come up with corporate thinking on social media, you will get what young people call cringe. It'll be artificially cool. It'll be people who are 55 years old doing a rap song because they think it's cool, or suddenly managers in suit and tie doing the ice bucket challenge because someone heard we should do that. And anyone is there and thinks, good grief, please stop, make it stop, make it stop. And you achieve the opposite of what you want to see. So, for example, one posting I saw on LinkedIn where just a picture of Pedro Pascal in a military uniform, and it says how the BDR explains other people how to close business on social media. I think that was the caption. Didn't you post that? Was it on yours?
Yeah, that was my post. Oh my
exactly.
God.
And that works well because you know how memes work.
Yeah.
When you don't know who Pedro Pascal is, if you had done the exact same caption with a corporate picture of a sales leader, anyone would say, oh, good grief, embarrassing self-promotion. Please do that somewhere else. You need to have the funny, quirky moment. And of course, because people say there is a certain level of risk that people do something wrong. Yes. And you need to have a crisis communication team prepared when people use humor, unfortunately, some people overstep the mark. And when you overstep the mark, the first thing you have to do is apologize, remove it, do something which is good for the victim offender, the victim and offender balance. But this can be managed. Give people guidelines, give people training, but don't come up with corporate communication guidelines with stiff and boring phrases and even more boring stock photos that no one wants to see.
Yeah. I love that. You always come back to start with the data. Don't be overwhelmed. Look at the data. And then from there, make the next choice. And that goes to everything. That goes to selling into a specific market, opening a new social media channel, or closing it down because it doesn't work. But in the end, I think two things that really stuck out. The first one was obviously, well, there was a lot of things that I actually stuck out. Like my pages are full now.
Good.
Never started your point of view, started their point of view. And what you just said at the end, stay authentic. Don't try to be someone that you are, that you simply not.
That is the reason why I stopped to wear suit and tie.
Yeah.
Because it's not me. I know that some people say, when you work with banks, everyone that works wears suit and tie. So first, that's not true, not anymore. And second, maybe I am the only trainer who doesn't wear suit and tie in a bank, and then that still works.
Yeah. I love how you also just, you sold all of your belongings and now you have your suit, like literally a cabin's suit that, like a
Minimalist
bag,
lifestyle.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it
By the
crazy?
way, there's a story behind that. I started my minimalist lifestyle not because I was spiritual or because I was enlightened or anything. When I moved from Berlin to London and I looked into the London rental market, I simply knew that's going to be a lot less square meters. So I moved from my very cheap Mauer Park flat, which I had in Berlin, into a 16 square meters shoebox in London, Kensington, because in London I could choose between either having a bit of more space on the suburbs, somewhere in the suburbs, or living more central but a lot less space.
Yeah.
And then I realized how much stuff I always carried with me that I never needed. And then from there, I really looked at what do you really need? And that's where the minimalism really started.
Yeah, I love that. One of the many things that I got to learn about you and that fascinate me. I think we are coming to the end of this episode. I have one final question for you because I want to make sure that everyone who's listening to this episode knows exactly what they can do today to start and implement and improve their leadership game. So my question is, what are 3 exercises or 3 tasks that someone can do today to improve their leadership?
So first, when you have a certain question, stick to data. There's Google Scholar available. You can contact me, of course, and you can go to ResearchGate or academia.edu. These are open source platforms where you find a lot of knowledge available. Stick to science, not just an opinion. Number 2, go in small bits. Do not start with, oh, okay, so I now learned how to give proper feedback. So my first feedback talk will be the ultimate crisis meeting with our most important client. No, your first talk will be, hey, a disagreement internally within my team. Maybe I test my techniques there first. So go in small bits. No leader did one training and then just used it all and it all worked fine. And the third thing is keep continuous education going. Feel free to go on my LinkedIn because often people say, a lot of trainers are not walking the talk because they don't invest in themselves. And that's true. Unfortunately, many trainers don't do that. Look on my LinkedIn. I continuously invest in my business, and this will never end because there is more scientific evidence created per day than I could ever read or digest. So I already have to select. Science leads the way. Very important. Always keep it practical. Get the real world experience because besides the data and knowledge, of course, the experience is crucially important. If you put all of that together, you will succeed in sales because sales is, I am born and bred Northern German. If someone had told me you're going to do cold calls, I would have laughed in their faces. So I learned it from zero knowledge and absolutely no clue and worked my way up from there. And I think with Zurich and London, where I am right now, it went pretty okay so far. So go for it.
Thank you so much, Niels. And guys, honestly, I would definitely take him up on this offer. Check him out on LinkedIn, connect with him, check out his masterclass. Again, I put it in the notes. And you said a couple of other things, like the book from Siegel Neely, right?
Professor Siegel Neely, yeah.
Siegel
Remote
Neely.
Work Revolution.
Remote Work Revolution.
You can probably put that in as well. I just sent you the name of the chat here. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Great. I'm definitely going to put that one in there as well. So you guys have everything together. Niels, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being here today. I have learned a lot and I can't wait to use it myself.
Perfect. Always happy to help. Thank you very much for the invite. Talk soon.